If you've ever asked yourself, who even am I if I'm not a professor? This episode is for you. One of the hardest parts about leaving academia isn't updating your resume or learning how to run a business. It's untangling your identity from your academic job title. That's the problem we're tackling today. In this very special episode, I'm joined by two brilliant career coaches, Tory Wobber of Academic Exit and Jen Polk of From PhD to Life. Together, we unpack how academia shapes our sense of self, what it means to grieve that version of yourself, and how to start rewriting your identity on your own terms. You'll hear real stories about what it feels like to let go of the ivory tower identity and step into something new. And in this episode, we're going to help you begin that process. Whether you're still in a tenure track or tenured role, or you're already planning your exit, this conversation is your first step to become someone new without having to start from scratch. Let's get started. Welcome to Leaving Academia, Becoming a Freelance Editor, the podcast. I'm your host, Paulina Cossette. In 2019, I was a political science professor who was fed up with the stress and hostility of academia, not to mention the low pay. I left my tenure track job and went from barely surviving to thriving as a freelance academic editor. Today, I own Acadia Editing Services, an editing and coaching business that brings in 6 figures a year. In this podcast, I'll discuss the challenges of academia, what academic editing involves, and what life as a freelancer looks like. If you're willing to jump outside your comfort zone, it is possible to find joy, true flexibility, and a profitable and rewarding career as an academic editor. Thanks for listening. One of the questions that I get most often from people who join my program, Becoming an Academic Editor or Coach, is how do I mentally make the shift from being an academic, being a professor, being a PhD, to being something else, a business owner, somebody in industry, whatever it is that somebody happens to be going into. And I'm here chatting today with Tory Wobber and Jen Polk, who are leading career coaches for people who want to exit academia. And we're going to get their take on this question of how do we shift our identity? And so some of the stuff that I'm curious about, well, let's start with this question. Maybe either Jen or Tory jump in. How do we form this identity of being an academic, of being a professor? How does that form, and why is it so powerful?
I'll jump in there. At least for my academic experience, I think academia has a lot of Kool-Aid, right? A lot of sort of cultural Kool-Aid that you drink as part of being in your department. You know, the faculty members and the other graduate students will pass on some pretty strong cultural norms to you that you feel a pretty strong pressure to conform to. And there are norms about how work gets done that we can talk about too. But just these norms of sort of we are in the ivory tower and we do this pure, wonderful work that is superior to that corporate, for-profit, evil stuff, right? There are just all sorts of beliefs that are out there that are reinforced that I think start to tie into your identity and start to become stories, beliefs that you hold. The other thing, and I was just doing some research this week on how people view their jobs, right? And there's research showing that people view their work as a job, a career, or a calling. I think of a lot of academics who think of it as a calling, right? The sort of bigger calling to do this work. And the tricky thing is that the calling-led work tends to get the most immersed in our identity, right? I'm doing this work because it's part of who I am, part of what I was put on this planet to do. And while that's lovely in terms of offering great whys for your work, it also means that work gets enmeshed with your identities in a very different way than it would if work were just your job, right? And so I think both the strong cultural norms of academia and the tendency to view it as calling-led work tend to bring identity into work for academics much more than other workplaces I've worked. I'm
Mm.
curious if that resonates with either of you.
Like the cult, you got to have something, right? Because all your peers are going off and getting jobs with, they're paying off their loans, they're buying houses, they're going fancy weddings, having kids, like all that shit that I never did any of that stuff. We got to have something, right? Like, and there's got to be something that holds you to like doing years of free or underpaid. Anyways, now I'm ranting, but the Kool-Aid is real. The Kool-Aid is real. It's very, very sticky.
Well, I think, Jen, you were the one that introduced me to the concept of vocational awe.
That's not my term,
And
but yes, absolutely.
no, yeah, but I think you shared it in a conversation we had had previously, and I think that is it's gets at what Tori was talking about, that we feel special, right? We feel like we are doing this calling, we are changing lives, we are influencing the next generation to save the world. And we feel really special about that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that inherently, but I do disagree with the way that it is abused by the powers that be, right? The people who run the institutions. And I also think that, like, I don't remember, you said anti-capitalism, right? Or we're not those evil capitalists. Well, it turns out that there are actually a lot of business owners who are good people and, like, many of us who go into business and we do good things. And so that's a tension that I've spent a lot of time thinking about, between the evils of academia versus the evils of capitalism, and how do we change our identity to feel better about leaving academia and going into either the corporate world or becoming an entrepreneur.
There's so much we could talk about here, but Paulina, why don't you like redirect this? Because I feel so many rants bubbling up.
Well, so we've talked about, what is it that gives us such a strong tie to our job, to our vocation, to our institutions, and maybe how can we give people permission to start considering seeing themselves in a new role, right? How do we help people overcome this barrier that holds them back from finding a career that really makes them happy?
Can I jump in again there, Jen, or you want to kick off on this one? Well, so for me, there are two things that are coming up. One is just how much of your identity is involved in work, and what might it look like to have that percentage, right? Say work is 80% of your identity. What might it look like to scale that back to 70 or 60 to make it a little more balanced? So there's first that just permission of like, what if work weren't your whole identity? But then say you don't even want to address that, and then it's just okay, what if work is still 80% of my identity, but now I'm considering a new work? Well, then realistically, and we don't talk about this all the time in coaching, but I think in academia it's real. There's a loss. There's a grieving. It's a death of an old self, right? You build up this self. Like my cocktail party self was all about Chimp and Bonobo stories. I had envisioned like the office with all the books that I was going to work in as a tenured faculty member, right? Like I had just all these things that were part of me. And so for me, I probably spent the better part of a year just like bawling my eyes out, grieving the loss of that identity, right? Like that was how I did it. I don't know if that's recommended, but I do think that just grieving the loss of like this vision, this dream, this person who we were, perplexingly, even if it's sad or angry or whatever, gives you the permission to start opening up, okay, maybe I could become someone new. And then if you don't grieve it well, if you remain angry, cynical, torn between multiple identities, you don't give yourself the chance to open up and find something new. It's actually grieving the loss of that past self, at least in my experience, is part of the process in finding a new self.
Yeah, I mean, I have a totally different answer to this. It's so interesting, right? I talk a lot about this with clients in my program about identity. I mean, it just comes up over and over again. And I think one key thing is that like the world around you, including academia, like the culture, the world around you is happy to like shove you into their own boxes, right? Boxes that you didn't put together, and they're happy to like shove you in a box and tape you up and put you in a corner, whatever, right? And all you, the landscape is just a whole bunch of boxes. That's boring. Um, you know, you. what I really like is that it doesn't matter what your job title is. It doesn't matter who like cuts your paycheck, right? Like it does, none of that stuff matters. What matters is like what makes you who you are, irrespective of like what's going on around you. And so this is something that I would encourage every professor to do for themselves is like, what is like, I'm laughing because the other day I said to my clients, like, be your own tree trunk. Like, what am I even talking about here? It's like, what is it that makes you you? What are those things? Like, what are those strengths and attributes? And it's like, examples that I always like to give about myself is like, it doesn't matter where I am, but if I'm like enjoying life, I'm building community. That is going to look radically different over I mean, I was doing this before there was really even an internet, right? Okay, I'm not that old. Anyways, you know what I'm saying, right? So radically different, but that has to always exist for me. And something else is like I love to be like facilitating, group coaching. I mean, we're gonna call it different things at different moments. Leading tutorial discussions as a TA, right? Like anyways, like that's one of those like those are the pillars of who I am. And organizing shit, like bringing people together to make stuff happen, right? So just to say like that's my identity. And sure, I could have done that as a professor. I could have done that as a career coach. Who knows what I'll do in future, but like it doesn't matter because I know that that's me, right? And I like that. I like that.
Yeah, I think you make a great point about you can do this thing. You can create community, you can teach, you can research in all kinds of different contexts, working for yourself, working for somebody else. It doesn't have to be inside an academic institution. And I think I would add also, when you are clinging to this academic identity, what are you missing out on? What is the identity giving you, and is it enough to make up for all of the stuff that you're missing out on, the family time, the living in a place you actually like, the higher pay, the actual vacations where you're not feeling guilty because you're not working, like all of these things that we sacrifice for our academic job just because of the identity. Like last time I checked, people aren't getting paid very well in academia. The working conditions suck. And so it's like, why do we prioritize that over everything else? So yeah, I think people have to come to terms with the question of what do they want their life to look like for however many days we have left. Is it just academia and giving it all to that, or do we want to actually live a full life where we're happy?
I mean, the conversation is never going to publish a piece written by me because I'm not affiliated with the institution. But like, so fucking what? Who cares? Sorry, making all these
Yeah.
videos
No, I
R-rated.
remember I remember having this moment when I was in grad school because, my advisor was like this prominent scholar he was a congressional scholar and everybody knew who he was. He was lovely, by the way. Like he was actually a lovely human being and a wonderful advisor. But I had this moment where I realized like literally no one outside of congressional studies knows who this person is. Like, so you can say he's this huge figure in our field. Great, wonderful for him. But like in the real world or even outside of political science, nobody has a clue who this person is. And so it's like, are you living in
It's not to say that you can't do it somewhere else. Hello, the three of us. Anyways, just remember, it's not over.
And I think that's it. I think falls into a suitcase because of where my paycheck comes from, because of what my title says. I have certain permissions or certain ways of being that are extended to me by that title and by that paycheck. So I'm like, really? Right? Like, what if there were more flexibility between what you did in a day and how you showed up? And yes, you're gonna have payment coming in from somewhere, right? Like those of us here on this call don't have a W-2 paycheck anymore, and yet we're still earning income so that we can put food on our table, right? So like, we do work that we enjoy doesn't always conform to our job title or our employment model. And so this notion that one employment model is superior to one another, or that one employment model sort of grants people prestige points. I keep thinking as we're having this conversation of this protest sign. So I did my undergrad at Harvard, and students would protest for the living wage for the workers on campus. And one of the signs they put up that just really is sticking to me now is workers can't eat prestige, right? So this notion that like Harvard is like, here, take some prestige, workers, right? It's like, no, 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 they deserve a living wage. I think in many cases, academia tries to give you prestige as sort of, okay, you can sacrifice pay and convenience of living and all those things because you've got prestige. But really looking at yourself and saying, like, how much is prestige actually doing for me? Like, yeah, it feels good, but how much is it actually doing? I think that starts to open the door to forms of work, forms of identity that aren't as prestige correlated.
And I wonder, I'll sort of put you both on the spot here, but in my program, we talk a lot about making this shift and what are some practical steps, maybe tangible, actual steps you can take to start to either try on this new identity, to feel it out, to dip your toe in the water, or to actually take steps toward becoming this new identity, whatever it is, whether it's a business owner or whatever it is you're going to do. And one of the stories that I share is when I was quitting my job and I didn't have a clue what I was going to go do, but I had this moment where I was on the phone with the provost and she was trying to convince me to stay. And it was in that moment where it very viscerally clicked for me, like, no matter what I do, I am never going to be happy as an academic. And I think that was a moment and a conversation that really shifted the identity. It was like a shedding of the academic identity. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do next, but it ain't this. And so I wonder if there's practical steps that you advise your clients or students in your program of how they can sort of try this on or start practicing the new identity.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's self-reflection, build on self-reflection, and that also in conversation with people. I mean, Tori's written about this on LinkedIn recently. Like, putting it out in the world makes it a little stickier too, right? Anyways, so as an example, I like doing this with folks. You know how there's this really typical way that we talk about, academics talk about themselves. Well, I have a PhD in, or I'm a professor of, and like, they start name dropping things. And like, that's all true, right? That's all true. And in certain spaces, that is a useful self-description, right? That people can slot you and understand you. What? Oh, okay. This exercise I do in workshops. I say, okay, here's your challenge. This is the lead of your new intro for yourself. You have a sentence or two, maybe three, and you are not allowed to reference your degree or your job title. So I don't want to see PhD. I don't want to see postdoc, professor, whatever. You are not allowed to reference your discipline. I don't want to see political science, history. Get that fuck out of there. And the third thing you're not allowed to do is reference your specific like subfield or topic or whatever, dissertation, whatever, right? And like, people get mad at me. And I'm like, you can add that stuff in later, but as a lead off, let's see what you got. In a room of people, I'm the person who. In my lab, everybody knows me as the guy that. You know how? Well, it turns out, right? I can see you do that one, Tori, with your bonobos or whatever. That'd be a good one. Turns out people are like that too. And guess what? In my career now, I get to, right? Ooh. Anyways, I like that, right? Well, blah, 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 blah.
Well, and I'll build on that, Jake, because I think part of it is letting go of our old descriptors, right? That our descriptors used to be my discipline or who I know or where I went to school or where I published or whatever it is, right? That those are the old descriptors. I would say there's also, bringing in the new identities. If you read Atomic Habits, he's basically like, okay, you can form new habits, but you have to talk about who you're becoming, right? And like actually getting explicit about who you're becoming and the new identity you're taking on is a key form to building new habits if that's of interest. I can speak myself to having done this twice. I'm now in my third career. I think with academia, the sort of who I was becoming, I just sort of ripped off the Band-Aid. I did it poorly, right? It was not necessarily as much of a process as it could have been. But when I was choosing to leave the big tech company, I was working at Google before I decided to become a coach. There, I think I stepped into the new identity a lot more gradually via some experiments. And that's actually the approach I would recommend. The ripping off the Band-Aid is possible, but way more painful. So for me, I had this notion that I wanted to be a coach, that I wanted to run a coaching business. So I went and took a coaching training, right? 3-day coaching thing. I was in a room with a bunch of other people who called themselves coaches. And I was like, ooh, let me try this on. Loved it. Did another coaching training. Got a client, got 2 clients, right? But it was sort of a 6-month process of piecemeal doing these experiments of, how do I like this different identity? Let me try this on. And for job seekers, my recommendation is to do this quickly via informational interview. But if you can do it via these sort of 3-day workshops or via sort of taking on one thing, that allowed me to much more readily say, no, I like this, I want to step towards it, than in academia where I just sort of had to make the jump and make the leap and do a role I didn't know that much about. By the time I jumped to run a coaching business, I had 6 months of sort of experiments confirming to myself that this was a path I wanted to go to. And so if folks have the opportunity to take that path, which in academia we don't always, but actually I would think in Paulina's program, there's this opportunity to sort of say like, let me go do some of this work. Let me build some of these elements of this business and see if it clicks. And if the answer is no, great, right? Like you've done the experiment, you've gotten to know, choose a different path. But I do think letting go of what you were and stepping towards possible things you could be gives you that permission, and that permission to experiment with it and not have to do it all at once.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, I do want to underscore that point that you just made that I think is really important, is that you don't have to rip off the Band-Aid and throw your hands up. I quit. I'm leaving. See ya. And then figure it out, right? Like you can take these little steps. You can dip your toe in the water. You can hire a coach like Tory or Jen to work with you. It can be secret. Nobody has to know about it, right? We're not going to tell your department chair that you're working with us. You can join a program like mine if you want to start a business and just learn about what it's like to be a freelancer, to create a website. And, if you're even just very first baby steps, you can open a Google Doc and start writing about what you might want to do. And we've got some resources we'll put in the show notes. If you want to work with any of us here, we are all fantastic, brilliant, beautiful, amazing coaches. So definitely reach out to one, if not all of us, when you're done watching this video. But hopefully this has been helpful. And, if you are unhappy, I just want to say you're not alone, and you just have to start thinking outside the box and exploring what else might be possible for you. If you're unhappy in academia and you think you might be a good editor or writing coach, check out my course, Becoming an Academic Editor. This digital course is paired with a 12-week group coaching program to support you through your decision to leave academia or not, and to start building a profitable and rewarding academic editing business. Learn more by going to acadiaediting.com/become an editor. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time.